Who actually owns the land that Israel and Palestine claim is theirs? Why is it so difficult to resolve? Which Arab country betrayed the Arab coalition to support the Israeli spies? And finally, I'll reveal my prediction of when this war will end. My name is Mayur and welcome to Just Facts 24/7. I've been interested in geopolitics for the last couple of decades, and in this video, I'll be focusing on just facts rather than emotions and agendas, and we'll go beyond the liberal, conservative, left-right stuff. So let's start with the biggest question. How did this problem start? And who owns the land that both Israel and Palestine claim as theirs? I'm not going to bore you with the history lesson, and will instead squeeze the key interesting facts and milestones in this quick short video. For over 400 years, from the year 1516 to 1918, the Ottoman Empire ruled pretty much the entire Middle East, including the area what we now call Israel and Palestine. The red area that you see marked here is the Ottoman Empire, and the blue is Egypt, which was occupied by Britain. Now there were people from three big religions living in this area since forever: Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And of course, Judaism, being the oldest of the three, which started around 4,000 years ago, was there in this region. And then came Christianity, which is around 2,000 years old, and then came Islam, which is around 1,400 years ago. Coming to the more recent 20th century, from 1914 to 1917, multiple countries including Britain, France, USSR, Serbia, Italy, and Greece attacked the Ottoman Empire from all sides. And the super powerful Britain, along with its good friend France, declared war on the Ottoman Empire on November 5th, 1914. Soon after, in 1915, Britain thought that it's best to join hands with the Arabs who've been fighting the Ottoman Empire since decades. So in 1915, they signed the Hussein-McMahon Correspondence, based on which Britain promised Arabs independence from the Ottoman Empire. So now Arabs have full confidence in Britain, and they're working with them to defeat the Ottoman Empire. But after signing the agreement with the Arabs, in 1917, 2 years after, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration. And this declaration caused a major issue with the Arab world, since the Balfour Declaration promised land for Jews, where in fact the natives, and by natives I mean Arabs, made up 90% of the population. So it was pretty clear that Britain was inclined to help Jews. Anyway, a couple of years after, Britain proceeds to defeat the Ottoman Empire and take over what's now called Palestine, Israel, as well as Jordan. The entire area was called British Mandate. They divided this area into two by a river, and this river was called the Jordan River, and it's the same river that everybody now knows through pro-Palestinian slogans, from the river to the sea. One side of this river was called Mandatory Palestine, which is now Palestine and Israel, and the second side was called Transjordan, which is now Jordan. So under Britain's control, because of the Balfour Declaration, thousands of Jews started to migrate. In fact, during the British occupation that lasted till 1948, Jewish population grew 11 times, from 56,000 in 1918 to 650,000 in 1948. This was great for Jews. It's a safe land. They were being persecuted in Europe, and they were fleeing, so just like you and I would do, run to a safe space. British Army's operations in Mandatory Palestine were mainly directed against various Arab groups that were unhappy with Jewish migration. Now, because of such a steep increase in Jewish population, the Arabs were extremely unhappy, and it resulted in multiple conflicts. One of the key ones was the Wailing Wall riots of 1929. And this was a turning point for the Arab-Jews relationship, since in this riot, Arabs stopped distinguishing between Jews who were originally from the Middle East versus the Jews who were European and were migrating to the Middle East. And all the riots now were directed to all kinds of Jews. So soon after the riots were over and Jews faced a lot of death and destruction, they finally thought it's about time for a Jewish state. Jews had money, so the first thing they did was, you got it right, they started to buy land. like massive purchases of land from big Arab landowners. From 1929 to 1936, Jews bought so much land from the Arabs that Arab world realized this is too much. So in 1936, they started what's called the Arab Revolt, which went on for 3 years till 1939. And eventually Winston Churchill, who was the Secretary of State for all the colonies in the world, was like, this is too much pressure from the Arab world, so we will issue the White Paper. This was kind of a law which had restrictions on Jews migrating to the Middle East. It had restrictions to the sale of land, and it proposed constitutional changes which basically said, this is one country ruled by the Arabs, who are the majority, but Jews as a minority have equal rights. So now the Arabs feel better with the issue of the White Paper. However, soon after the White Paper, World War II started, and now everybody is pretty much consumed by the World War. Soon after the end of World War II in 1945, UN came up with a partition plan, the first two-state solution in 1947, the Jewish Palestine and the Arab Palestine. And the plan allocated 55% of the land to Jews and 45% to the Arabs, and 0.5 designated as an internationalized city of Jerusalem. This partition was based on demographic distribution, farmable land, natural resources, transportation networks. So according to the UN, they did a good job and gave everybody a decent solution for these decades of conflict. This was the start of the two-state solution idea, which we hear about all the time. However, because of the 45% land allocated to the Arabs, they struck it down as unjust. And so the conflicts continued. The next year, in 1948, Britain was struggling with the impacts of World War II, plus there's a lot of instability in the region, and there's international pressure to withdraw from the occupied lands, so they finally decided to withdraw from British mandate, or as we now know, Palestine, Israel, and Jordan. And their withdrawal was the turning point in the region's history, because keeping the promise of the Balfour Declaration of 1917, where they promised Jews their land, Israel was established on May 14, 1947. The same day, the Jewish leader David Ben-Gurion reached out to the President of the United States of America, President Harry Truman, to recognize Israel. And the very same day, President Truman issued the Statement of Recognition. Now there's no going back. Israel is formed and recognized by the two most powerful countries that won the World War, US and Britain. While the State of Israel was established, the Palestinian state was not. So the remaining territories of the mandatory Palestine, which is the West Bank, was managed by or administered by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip was administered from 1948 to 1967 by Egypt. And if you think the Arab world took this lightly, you're definitely mistaken. What followed was the Arab-Israel War of 1948, which led to thousands of people dying and over 700,000 Palestinians being displaced. So if you think now in 2024, it's the first time such a huge number of Palestinians are displaced, you're wrong, because almost 75 years ago, they went through exactly the same. Anyway, things move on, and the Arab world is now making plans to take the land back. So in 1965, there is an Arab League summit planned in Casablanca, which is attended by 13 of the Arab countries, including Saudi, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, and Kuwait, and a few others. And this meeting was planned to discuss the operational readiness to go into war with Israel. However, what's going to happen next was pretty shocking. King Hassan II of Morocco, who's the host of this Arab League summit, betrays the Arab world and invites Israeli spies from Shin Bet, which is like FBI, domestic security, and Mossad, which is like CIA, the foreign security, to spy on the Arab leaders by bugging their hotels and recording their conversations. Now, as per Shlomo Gazit, who was the Major General of IDF or Israeli Defense Forces during that time, Israel realized that the Arab world's nowhere close to being ready to fight Israel. So Israel now thinks this is their opportunity, and they started preparing. It took them 2 years to prepare, and in June 5th, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, marking the beginning of the Six-Day War. Now remember, Jordan and Egypt have most of Palestine, and no points for guessing how long this war went. Exactly 6 days, or precisely 132 hours. It was estimated that almost 20,000 Arabs died, whereas Israel's death toll did not even cross 1,000. In fact, it was around 800. This war left the Arab leaders shocked by the severity of their defeat because guess what? Israel captured and occupied a total of 70,000 kilometers or 27,000 square miles of territory. The Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan and the Gaza Strip, and including Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. So that's a lot of land that Israel took over from that 6-day war. Israel demonstrated again that it was able and willing to initiate strikes and that could change the regional balance, and that their strategic and operational readiness was above and beyond all. In 1970, when the president of Egypt and the Arab world leader Abdel Nasser died of a heart attack, his successor Anwar Sadat took over. And Anwar was a brave, fearless leader who said they're not going to let Israel take the territory. And so, along with Soviet Union and Syria, they attacked Israel in 1973. And this was on the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, which was also in the holy month of Ramadan for the Arabs. One similarity between this war of Yom Kippur and what transpired on October 7, 2023 was that Israel was caught off guard and suffered a huge loss initially, just like they did on October 7th last year. Israel finally won the war, but Egypt's message was clear. They can attack, and they can win a few initial days, and that they are not afraid. Finally, in 1979, US mediated a peace treaty and Israel returned all of Egypt's land back. Fast forward to 2006. Palestine has its general elections and Hamas comes to power with 74 seats out of 132. They defeated Fatah government that was ruling for a while now. Hamas is very clear on the agenda. There are 4 key items. First one being Palestine should have independence from the land that they lost in 1967 in the Six-Day War. 2, they should have decision-making in those regions. 3, outside forces should not be allowed to intervene. And 4, that it wants Arabs and the Muslims to support their cause. And they were willing to do whatever it takes. Now, since Palestine is not doing great economically, it's getting a lot of aid from countries and UN. It was once said that Palestine will become the next Singapore of Middle East. That's the amount of money that was pouring into Palestine. To give you an idea, from 1994 to 2020, Palestine got $40 billion in aid. And they don't have to return it, it's just an aid. So once Hamas comes into power, most of the money is spent on accumulating warfare, stocking up weapons, building tunnels, and matter of fact, Hamas is not poor, since it has a military budget of anywhere between 100 million to 350 million US dollars. Now moving on to October 7th, 2023, Jewish massacre happens. 1,139 deaths, 251 kidnappings, and as of June, they still have 81 alive captives and 43 dead bodies. What transpired after October 7th was Israel waging a war. Till date, we have over 37,000 people in Gaza dead. It's a humanitarian crisis. Out of 2 million Palestinians, 1.7 million have been displaced. UN has not declared a famine yet, but the situation is not far from a famine. There's no food, there's no water, and over 10% of the kids have some sort of malnutrition. Medical supplies are scarce. Doctors are conducting surgeries without anesthesia. Aid agencies are warning of a growing health risk from sewage overflows and lack of access to toilets. In the safe zone, there are over 500,000 people that are using only 121 toilets. So over 4,000 people using one toilet. Over 85% of the children did not eat for a whole day and at least once in 3 days. So the situation is pretty bad. Coming to the final part of when this war will end. And before I share my prediction, there's one hard fact that I'm really fascinated by. And that is, while Hamas and the world wants ceasefire, no one, and by no one I mean the protesters and the people across the globe, no one is talking about the hostages. It's been 9 months that people have been kidnapped. If Hamas releases all the dead and alive hostages, Israel will be in massive pressure to stop and back off. I'm sure there's more than meets the eye, and you and I are just common citizens. So finally, I'm coming to when will this end? And to be honest, the situation looks grim. Predict another 5 to 6 months before this war comes to an end, because Hamas is still pretty strong. It started with 30,000 soldiers, lost about 10,000, but it has a continuous recruitment process, and soldiers starting from the age of 17, 18 years old. And remember, half the population of Gaza is under 18 years old. So I predict this war coming to a full stop between October 2024 and next year, January 2025. Just 4 weeks ago, Israel sent a ceasefire proposal, but Hamas rejected it on June 4th. So if you think Hamas is weak, they're not. Hamas political bureau member Osama Hamdan said Hamas cannot agree to a proposal that does not guarantee a permanent ceasefire, a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, and a hostage for prisoner exchange. Israel has captured more than 3,600 Hamas prisoners, and Israel proposals had 3 phases. First phase was a 6-week ceasefire and withdrawal of Israeli forces from the densely populated areas. It would also release some hostages, and Israel will guarantee aid trucks into the area. Phase 2 will start after Israel has done its bit. So Hamas will release all the alive hostages, and Israel exits Gaza completely. And phase 3 was reconstruction of Gaza and Hamas releasing all the dead bodies of hostages. So while this was Israel's proposal and Hamas rejected, Israel said that there is no better offer that they will give. So unfortunately for the people impacted by war, this is a stalemate situation with no end in sight. Now Israel says there's no ceasefire until Hamas is destroyed. To add to this, 2 of Israeli ministers have said that they will resign and bring down Netanyahu's government if he accepts US President Joe Biden's ceasefire proposal. They expect complete destruction of Hamas and return of all the hostages. So is this all about power, money, religion, land? We're common people and we will never know. What we do know is who's suffering. That's us. If you think you're sitting in Australia or Europe, South America, or even Africa and you're not impacted by this war, I would say you're wrong. Every country in this world is directly or indirectly connected to this war. The world's total military budget for 2023 was over $2,400 billion. Imagine if all the countries would divert their funds for just 1 year, only 1 year, and forget about land and power and proving their religion is better than others, and instead spend the money on education, infrastructure, technology, development, healthcare. I always imagine aliens quietly looking at us and judging us, thinking, what kind of fools live on this planet? Thank you for watching this video, and let me know what you want me to cover next.